it had to come to a conclusion. It absolutely had to. I mean, you don't meet the media and say what Kyle Dubas said on Monday, and then expect the Toronto Maple Leafs as an organization just sit tight for the foreseeable future. With all due respect to Dubas, and the pressures that come along with that job, and it's a special job, general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, I think from a team perspective, this is far from best case scenario. Best case scenario would have been Dubas saying on Monday, I want to come back. You hammer out the details of the contract, and an announcement is made by now, or perhaps Wednesday, Thursday, that he's reached an agreement on an extension. So this kind of throws everything into the blender, doesn't it? And certainly a higher level of upheaval. And as I was waiting, I heard, I think it was you, Mike, talk about the possibilities of who might now succeed Kyle Dubas. The one thing that the Maple Leafs do have in abundance is management type, right? You've got Lawrence Gilman there. On a short term, could he be the interim general manager? Perhaps. Brendan Pridham is highly regarded for his work with the Toronto Maple Leafs cap, which is like wrestling with rattlesnakes in the regular season. I guess I find it hard to believe the Maple Leafs would go back to another first-time NHL general manager. So that then, gives us a pretty short list of those who are available that do have legit and hard NHL management experience. So I think that Brendan Shanahan is going to look at all scenarios, but it seems like he's more likely to look for experience at this stage.
So obviously, Dregs, we're going to hear from Brendan Shanahan, the team president, who's in just past his 9th anniversary as team president. He's going to be doing a 3 p.m. press conference from Scotiabank Arena. We will carry it here live on TSN 1050, 3 p.m. presser. If you're guessing, and we're all speculating here, Dregs, as we move forward into this great unknown that is this Leafs offseason, if you're speculating, who's on the short list here? Like, you have to believe that Brendan Shanahan knew from the moment Kyle Dubas said he wasn't sure about this next year. Yeah. And maybe before that, you have to assume this is not necessarily blindsided. You have to assume plan Bs were in motion. Any idea, any speculation about who plan B might be, or if there is indeed a short list where the Leafs may be heading?
Well, I believe that Shanahan will go into full search mode. He will do a full general manager search here. Pure speculation, as we're having this conversation on Leafs lunch at 12:26 on a Friday afternoon. Brad Treliving jumps off the page for me. Right. And the reason is, look at the heavy lifting that he had to do and the grenades that he had to juggle as GM of the Calgary Flames. And some of it wasn't pretty, right? But he did admirable work, including pulling off a blockbuster deal with the Florida Panthers that, it didn't pay dividends last year with Huberdeau and Weegar having underachieving years. But to pull a trade like that off, a magnitude trade like that, that speaks to the level of intestinal fortitude that you have to have. So now you attach the workload ahead for the next general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It starts with an instant internal investigation, consideration, some sort of dissection. Okay, is your head coach a head coach that you believe in, that you want to stick with, or do you want to go in a different direction? And then you've got July 1st looming, and we know how complicated that likely is going to get with Austin Matthews and William Nylander. And then all of the talk of, do the Toronto Maple Leafs have to do something to the core after losing out in 5 games of round 2 to the Florida Panthers? That's not light lifting stuff, right? So when I look at available candidates, Treliving has to be near the top of that list. And as I reported on Twitter earlier, we know that Stan Bowman, formerly of the Chicago Blackhawks, has talked to NHL teams about a variety of positions, including GM positions. He needs full approval, no different than Joel Quenneville, to return to an NHL club, and that approval has to come from Commissioner Gary Bettman, which I'm told is expected to happen at the end of this season. Okay, well, there are 2 interesting qualified candidates, right? Can Shanahan and company wait that long? Can they wait that long? Maybe, because of what I said earlier, all of the management candidates that they have internally. It's not like when Kyle Dubas said what he said on Monday, the organization went into the fetal position. They didn't. I mean, they've got management executives that handle the day-to-day, but they do need an experienced decision maker.
Drex, do you think that this market would be willing to accept like Stan Bowman and Quenneville, coming into this organization given, their recent history?
Well, there would be backlash. Of course there would be, right? Stories would be written. There's no doubt about that. But they're going to return to the NHL at some point. I mean, you can't keep these guys on the outside forever, I don't think. And I know that that's not the plan of the National Hockey League. For those listening who are upset by what I just said, you also then have to consider and balance the work that they've done since being away from the league, right? Stan Bowman has worked significantly with Sheldon Kennedy and his respect group, tirelessly, in fact. And I know that Joel Quenneville has worked very closely with Kim Davis, who's a highly respected executive with the NHL head office. So, yeah, there will be pushback when these men return to the NHL, but I don't have any doubt that Stan Bowman is going to manage again. If not be a general manager, then certainly an assistant general manager, something along those lines. And I don't doubt for a second that Joel Quenneville is going to be a coach in the National Hockey League again. I mean, we know that Mike Babcock viewed in Columbus, so should we be surprised that Joel Quenneville would be a coach of interest to some NHL clubs? I'm not.
Dregs, obviously there's so many moving parts here, so much uncertainty around the Maple Leafs as they move into this offseason, and we'll hear some of that we'll get some clarification from Brendan Shanahan at 3 p.m., which will be obviously heard here live on TSN 1050. Can't stress that enough. But Dregs, for your money, when you look at the big decisions that need to be made around this club, none loom larger than the decision around Austin Matthews. And obviously it's going to be a two-way street. Austin Matthews has to make a decision to sign here. The Leafs obviously have to make a decision about what they're willing to pay to sign him. But how do you think, if you can speculate, how do you think the fact that Kyle Dubas is out, the fact that Kyle Dubas had a very good relationship with Austin Matthews and his agent, Judd Moldaver, what does it mean, in your view, for the relationship between the club and number 34?
Yeah, well, look, I can guarantee you that Austin and the agent, Judd Moldaver, are having a conversation about that right now. And could it be a variable, a factor? I think it absolutely could be. I don't think that it's a deal maker or a deal breaker either way. I agree with you. I think that Matthews had a sound, very good relationship, as does Judd with Kyle Dubas. So I think it has to be one of the many considerations that are going to go into the ultimate decision as to what a contract extension for Austin Matthews looks like and when the time is. I believe that July 1st is just another date on the calendar. A significant one, obviously, because no move clauses kick in, and that will significantly alter perhaps what the path might be for the next general manager. Not that I think that the next GM is going to, consider trading Austin Matthews. I don't buy that for a minute. But as we learn and experience through the David Pastrnak saga with the Boston Bruins, just because July 1st opens the door to begin the discussion on a contract extension, that doesn't mean that you should automatically expect or anticipate that an extension will happen within a day or two of July 1st, right? These things can drag on. So I think Matthews is going to look at all scenarios here. I really, truly do. Is the core four going to remain in place? It seems like a stretch when you look at what William Nylander is likely going to command and has earned to this point. The salary cap isn't going up next season dramatically. I know they're going into the final year, but you do have to forecast then the following year after that. So there are lots of things. Matthews loves playing with Marner. He loves having William Nylander on the team. So when you're a star player and you've got the clout that Austin Matthews has, I think that everything is considered, including a big decision like this to move away from Kyle Dubas.
Do you see a scenario where, the core four does return? I mean, like you mentioned, there's a lot of heavy lifting to do before July 1st, where things become a lot more difficult to make deals. If they get to that point, might the new GM say, let me get a full year to get a full scope of the organization before we go in and make some drastic changes?
Yeah, I could envision that, but you could also envision the exact opposite occurring too, right? And the new GM saying, well, they've worked with this group for the better part of 7 years, and they're star players, each and every one of them collectively. They just haven't been able to lead this team deep into the postseason, and the disappointment is very recent, losing to Florida. So I don't necessarily have any attachment to these men, so why don't I try and get some of the work done ASAP? That could happen. That's conceivable. I would think that that's more applied to Nylander than anyone else. But I could also, understand and appreciate the wait and see approach as well. There's no rush with these guys from a trade perspective. There's no rush, but you also don't want to risk losing one of these top dogs for nothing as free agents. So I think everything will be on the table when the Maple Leafs hire their new GM.
Well, Dregs, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us with this breaking news, a special Friday edition of Dreger here on Leafs Lunch. Well, I know it's going to be a busy afternoon for you, I'm sure, so we'll let you go, but we do appreciate the time.
All right, guys. Have a good one.